Welcome, everybody, to the Just-in-Time Cafe interactive session. I'm Elizabeth Swan, co-founder of the Just-in-Time Cafe. I will be your moderator today, and today's interactive session is titled, How to Use Mural for Simulations, Huddle Boards, and Project Delivery, as it says on the slide. Our guest host today is Peter Cullen. Let me tell you a little bit about Peter. Woo-hoo. Peter's in charge of Shell contracts and procurement, the Global Contingent Workforce Program, and he's the continuous improvement leader and master black belt and lead master black belt. Peter is coming up on 20 years as a continuous improvement professional, specializing in Lean Six Sigma and implementation leadership. He cut his teeth on a manufacturing production line making beer kegs. This was new to me. And then somehow ended up heading up a Six Sigma deployment in luxury hotels via a circuitous route through facilities management and the Scottish ambulance service. There's a backstory here. We'll find out at some point. After 12 years in the posh hotels, though, it was time to swap crisp linen and fluffy towels for coveralls, a hard hat, and the sweet smell of glycol and hydrocarbons. Joining Shell to head up a lean deployment into the technical directorate of their North Sea upstream business. Little known fact, I had the honor of training Peter to be a black belt when I was heading up a Lean Six Sigma rollout of Starwood Hotels and Resorts. This included a fantastic trip to Lisbon, Portugal, and Madrid, Spain. And Madrid was during the World Cup, so that was particularly exciting. And almost 20 years later, I have the honor to bring Peter to the Just-in-Time Cafe. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. This is an interactive session, so feel free to keep your video on. It's great to see participants as we work through what Peter has in store for us. Please keep your microphones on mute unless you're answering a question. And you can also put your questions into the chat area. And we'll keep monitoring chat in case you've got questions for us. Videos of all our webinars, including this interactive session, are available on the Just-in-Time Cafe website. Those will be under webinars. We'll constantly update those, and anyone who registers for these events will automatically get an email when they're ready. So you'll know when to go there and grab those. So I am going to pass the hosting duties over to Peter. Take it away, Peter.
Hello. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of the things that we've been up to in Shell with Mural. So if anybody's not familiar with Mural, it's a sort of collaborative whiteboard piece of software. So we first sort of started using Mural probably about 6 to 8 months ago. And I can safely say that it's without a shadow of a doubt, it has really sort of been a bit of a game changer in terms of how we do continuous improvement across the world. And particularly today, I'm going to talk to you about some applications of it for use in remote teams and remote training. So I've got a couple of things to sort of talk you through. We'll do a little bit of explanation of where and how we've used it initially for training. We're going to have a real-time live go at actually a little training simulation exercise, and hopefully we'll get you guys to join in on that. We've not tried it before with a group this size, but we'll give it a try. And for those of you who are familiar with Mural, we'll get you using that, and you'll be able to see what that's how that can be used. When that's done, we'll have a quick run through a couple of other applications that we use it for. The remote management of a virtual team, which spans time zones all the way from Europe through to Southeast Asia. And we'll also look at how we use it for delivering and assuring project delivery in a place that has anything up to about 30 to 35 projects running concurrently all at once. So without further ado, I am going to just introduce you to first piece of how we use it. So within Shell, we did have a 3-day classroom sort of lean training, lean come green belt training. And with the advent of COVID and coronavirus and lockdowns and all this sort of thing, not surprisingly, that took a bit of a hit, being able to do that in a physical environment and get everybody together in a classroom. So very quickly, we had to come up with a way of basically running the same training with the same learnings and the same richness, but all sat in rooms dotted around the world. And Mural was something that we stumbled across as being a tool that actually made this possible. So for those of you who have been around a while, you might remember something, one of those sort of classic lean simulations from, I think it was Rath and Strong at the time, called the Courier game. And it's a simulation by which you have these sort of order cards and they get filled out and you have to do some calculations. And then when you've done your piece of the process, you pass it on to the next person and they carry on. And through a couple of rounds, iterative rounds of this, you teach people the value of pull systems over push systems, Kanbans, 5S, workload leveling, all sorts of things, okay? So taking that as a sort of working concept, we came up with a way of doing the same, but using Mural as this sort of collaborative online tool. So we could have literally people sat in 16 different countries, all sat at their kitchen table, all working the little process, calculating what needed to be on the cards and moving them onto the next part of the process. So we basically rebuilt this thing called the Courier game in Mural, and everybody could dial into it and do it all at once. So the objective of the simulation that we use it for is to send these little order cards through from beginning to end and get them through to the customer with the right numbers on and with the right calculations and values done. And I'll show you, I'll put up on the screen just a little, this is a little video that we recorded a couple of weeks ago of the simulation actually happening in real time. So this was a class predominantly of people in India, but with a couple of people from Holland and a couple of people from Malaysia as well. This is speeded up slightly for purposes of the video, but you can see that you've got 16 people working in this online space at once, each one of them picking up the order cards, doing their calculations, and passing it on to the next person along the line. What's on the screen now, the video, is round 3 of the simulation. So by this point, we've already taken them through things like cell layouts and Kanban and workload leveling and various other things. So you can sort of get a bit of an idea from just watching this on the screen of the sorts of activity that the sort of simulation activities that you can run. So that's what we use that for, teaching the sort of the basics of lean, the basics of process flows and things like that. Okay. And in order to do that, we have to use some fairly sort of elaborate technology. So this is just a quick photograph of my desk when I was facilitating that training. So on the left, we've got, in this case, Google Chrome with all the participants on it and the chat window open. And then on the screen on the right, we've got what you probably recognize as Mural with the simulation open on it and the simulation running. And then the PowerPoint slides that go with it, and the sort of electronic agenda time, keeping everything to time as well. So having the sort of technological hardware at the same time as the Mural platform itself really brings together your ability to run what is effectively a a full-on training simulation that we're probably all used to, but in that very sort of virtual environment. So what I wanted to do is actually give you a chance to have a go at something similar, okay? And I'm going to put in the chat room to everybody a link. And if you could click on that link, you should be able to join me in a simulation called the coin flip exercise, which we're going to try and have a go at in real time with you guys operating the process. Okay. So I'll give you just a minute or two to log into Mural, and then I'll talk you through what we're going to do and how it works. Okay. So if you could all, I'm going to try and bring you all together and take you over to this part of the what's called the canvas. Okay. So we've got lots of different animals flying around. We've got owls and shrimps and sea turtles. So we've got 4 teams set up. I don't think we're going to need 4 teams today because we haven't got that many people. But I'm going to need you to organize yourselves into teams of 9 in a minute, but we'll get there in a second. Okay. So again, this is basically a virtual version of a physical simulation that is used quite a lot, particularly in agile training. I've seen it. And the idea is that you have coins and you flip the coins over, and then when you flipped all the coins over, you move it to the next person in the process, and you work the process from beginning to end, and we take some timings and prove some interesting concepts. Okay, so we're going to split you into teams, and each team is going to run this process by which we have 4 workers. Okay, and you have 12 coins, and each coin needs to be flipped in terms of its color to the next color in the sequence. And the sequence is this little diagram on the left here. So if the coin is orange, you flip it to red. If it's red, you flip it to green. If it's green, you flip it to blue. If it's blue, you flip it back to orange. Okay. And in order to do that, if you just click on the coin, if you could just watch the screen share for a second, I'll walk you through this. If you click on the coin, you get this little toolbar appear, and on the right of the toolbar is this little teardrop icon. If you click on that, you'll get the color palette, and you just move it to the one to the right. If it's red, you move it to green. If it's green, you move it to blue. If it's blue, you move it back to orange, as per the little sequence that I've given you. Okay. When all the coins within a red box are flipped, you can highlight them and move them to the next worker along, and the next worker along will do the same. Okay. So I need you to organize yourselves into teams of 9. All right. And we'll start at the top and just we'll work down until we've got complete teams of 9. We might end up with maybe 2 teams. I'm not sure. Put your name onto one of these sticky notes by just double clicking on it and just type your name in there. Once all the sticky notes in one team are full, just move down, just scroll down a little bit to team 2 and do the same, and we'll see if we can get 2 full teams going. Esther, you're going to be worker 1. I'm going to go with Kelly, worker 2. And Ben is going to be worker 3. And Sabine is going to be worker 4. Okay. And we've got also 4 timekeepers. So timekeepers, you're going to need to whip out your smartphone or some kind of stopwatch on your computer screen. Okay. And what we'll do is, William, you can be, and Timekeeper 1. Robinson, you can be Timekeeper 2. Jessica, you can be Timekeeper 3. And Jordan, you can be Timekeeper 4. All right. Now, what I'd like you to do, Timekeepers, is when your worker starts flipping coins, I want you to start your stopwatch. And when your worker finishes flipping all their 12 coins and moves them onto the next workstation, I want you to stop your stopwatch and then type into that white box the time that it's taken your worker to do their coin flips. Okay. There's then going to be a overall timekeeper that's going to time from the moment I say go until the last coin is flipped in worker 4's workstation. Okay, so we're going to get an overall total time for the total thing. All right. So, workers, are you clear on how to flip the coins? Please shout.
This is Kelly. I'm clear on how to flip them, but for workers 2, 3, and 4, so do we just pull over the coins from the worker ahead of us and then flip them?
No. So worker 1, so Esther, once you've finished flipping all the coins to the next color along, if you hold down the shift key on your keyboard and highlight them all, it will pick them all up as a group, and then you'll move them, click anywhere on it, and you can move them all into Workstation 2 and drop them into Workstation 2 ready to go. Okay. Right. That's the point where Workstation 2's timekeeper will start the stopwatch. And then, Kelly, you can start flipping them the moment they've been dropped into your workstation. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Got it. Okay. All right. Timekeepers, are you clear on what to do?
So for worker 4, when they're completed, essentially the next step would be for them to move on to the next worker. But since there's no worker after worker 4, do I just...
So you stop the stopwatch when the last coin is flipped. You'll be able to see them doing it.
Perfect. That works.
Yep. So timekeepers ready. Overall timekeeper ready. And we'll go 3, 2, 1, go.
Things are happening.
Things are happening. Is it working, Esther? Yep, I can see them changing color.
How often have you run this simulation?
Probably about a dozen times, maybe.
I like the simplicity of it.
By the time we run this, people have usually, by the time we run this in the training that we do, people have had at least 2 or 3 other things in Mural that they've been doing. So people are already sort of quite familiar with the workings of Mural by the time they get to this. So,
yeah, there are other, platforms. Someone was just reminding me or asking this morning, about there's Miro, there's Jamboard.
Timekeeper 1, you can stop your stopwatch. Timekeeper 2, you can start your stopwatch. And Kelly, off you go.
Nice job, Esther. I think you've done this before.
Yeah, I missed the color. But
what I was saying was Mural is sometimes held up as a bit of a race car. Like it's got more bells and whistles than most. And I don't know if you've ever tried Jamboard, Peter.
Not familiar with that one. No.
And that I've heard referred to as a semi-smart virtual whiteboard. So you can use different platforms. This one just happens to be one that a lot of folks are familiar with.
William, did you get a time for Esther's flipping?
Yes, I did. 146.
Okay, 146.
Nice work.
Excellent. 146. Thank you very much.
Can we place our bets on the fastest worker?
No pressure.
The fastest coin flipper in the US or in the country, or in the world.
Did you do a lot of changing this up between iterations, Peter?
To begin with, we had all the coins the same color, changing all the coins to the same color. And when people who were quite familiar with Mural tried it, they knew all the shortcuts of how to highlight everything at once and flip it all at the same time, which is why the coins are now different colors and you flip them in a sequence, because that was to make it cheat proof.
This is Kelly. I am struggling with that movement part. They're all clipped, but I cannot get them moved. So I'm doing shift, they're highlighted, and then when I try to move it, it unhighlights.
Are you all done? Do you want me to do it for you?
That would be wonderful.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you.
There we go. All right, Timekeeper 3, start your stopwatch. There we go. Robinson, did you get a time for station 2?
Yes, I did so. That was 2 minutes and 19 seconds.
19. There we go. Perfect.
Fabulous timekeeping, Robinson.
Thank you very much. Ben's off and running.
I think with simulations, you are teetering between simplicity and difficulty. So your inclination, or my inclinations, having built 3 different simulations, is to design a little too much difficulty, and I always have to ratchet it back. And you just, Dave, gave an example of too much simplicity, and you had to ratchet it up.
When we first did this, I think the original version of this was built with 20 coins, and it was just a little bit too slow. 12 seems to be a nice balance between keeping it moving, keeping people interested, and still actually proving the concept. So,
yeah, it's another aspect.
Yeah.
One question I had was the shift and move. It seems like that might work better with a mouse. Are people finding that kind of movement works better with a mouse? Because I know that sometimes in other Mural sessions, people said, if you have a mouse, it works a lot easier. Things work a lot easier. What would you say to that, Peter?
Yes, I would be absolutely with you on that one. Trying to do it with some kind of trackpad is horrendous. Jessica, did you get a time for workstation 3?
I was actually covering for Jessica as well, and it was 1 minute and 26 seconds.
Wow. That's good going. Well done, Ben. Mm-hmm.
So that was 47 seconds.
Whoa.
Done already? Wow.
Oh.
All right, so we've got 146, 219, 126, 47. I think that's a world record so far. And then 625 from start to finish. Okay, so excellent. That's fantastic. Thank you. So that's, again, in terms of teaching the simulation that we're teaching here the difference between batched processes and single piece flow, and actually getting that sort of continuous flow piece going. So what we'll do, we'll just maybe do one more run of this, and we'll jump to round 2. So do all the same things again, same people do the same things again, but this time you've got little batches of 3 rather than all 12 before moving it. So you can flip 3, move them along. So you can flip those 3, and then you can move them and put them there so that Kelly can start working on them. And then when Kelly, when you finish those 3, you can move them on so workstation 3 can start working on them, and so on. Okay, so you've got a much smaller batch this time. All right, but beyond that, everything stays exactly the same in terms of what you do. So if you're ready to go, we'll just do one more run of this using the smaller batches, so you can sort of see it happening, and then we'll leave this and move on to the rest of the presentation. Okay, so Timekeepers ready? Yes.
Ready.
Yes. Excellent. Workers ready? Good. Okay. After 3, 2, 1, off you go.
Need a playlist like take this job and shove it.
Tracy, I'm going to put a little check mark next to your name with your task for the next simulation, and that is get the playlist together. That'd be good. Interesting how you reduced the batch size. Again, simplicity. Yep. Just going for, I remember Courier Sim. I was actually at Rasmussen 100 years ago. And, moving packages from point A to point B.
Absolutely.
It was not.
We've all been there.
not rocket surgery. It was fairly simple. Yeah, these people are booking.
We were at about 1:20 for the first 3 to get completely finished.
Let's go for 1:20 then, just to
give it the touch of reality. Is that what you want, yeah. Peter?
Okay. Step 2. Do we have a time for step 2?
Yes, the total time was 1:33. That's from the moment when we got the first batch to the moment when we transferred the last batch to the next station.
Perfect. Workstation 3?
Yes, it was 1 minute and 42 seconds.
42. Brilliant.
2:35 for the overall to get them complete.
Wow.
And about 1:20 to get the first set of 3 finished.
Well, wow.
Okay.
Yes, station 4 was 1 minute and 21 seconds.
1 minute and 21. Okay. So, as you would expect with a simulation like this, the timings within the individual steps are roughly the same. I mean, as you get more used to doing it, you tend to go a little bit faster. But instead of highlighting the coins and moving them once, you're now highlighting and moving 4 times rather than once. So actually, in some cases, you do see the timing within the workstation actually get slightly longer. But what you do get by moving them in smaller batches is that end-to-end time really starts to come down. So we've come down from 6.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes. And if we were to move on to round 3, which we won't do today for the sake of time, but if you were to move on to round 3, you would see that coming down even more. And that 6 minutes, that 6.5 minutes would probably come down to about 1.5 minutes by that time. So it's just, again, just sort of proving the point as a simulation of the advantages, albeit almost sort of paradoxically, by working on smaller things at once, rather than batching stuff together, things actually go faster. That confuses a lot of people a lot of the time. But, just to prove that point, it's a lovely little simulation. It works a treat. And, you can use that very simply to, sort of prove that sort of single piece flow concept in a nice, simple, straightforward way. Okay. So well done, everyone. That worked certainly as well as I could have expected it to. So thank you very much for doing that. Any quick questions on that before we jump back into the main session?
Just really quickly, how much time do you spend for this particular exercise, roughly? I mean, that was great, simple. It seems like it's quick too. I mean, what do you say, like 30 minutes or 40 minutes to do the whole exercise?
I think we have 45 minutes set into the training agenda for this. And again, going into it, you're probably briefing it because we're training people that aren't necessarily sort of continuous improvement professionals. We're taking them through theory of Little's law and stuff like that in the run into this, and then we're doing the full 3 rounds through to single piece flow as well. Mm-hmm. And working out the exit rates and all that sort of thing. So it goes a bit deeper. What you've seen just there is the heart of it, and then there's various other things sort of bolted on around it. But 45 minutes, I think, is what we have in the agenda for it. So yeah, you can rattle through it quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that, everyone. So I want to move on now, and so that was an example of using the Mural platform for simulation and training. Want to move on to talking about how we use it for remote management of a team in this case. So I work in this thing called the Contingent Workforce Program, Global Contingent Workforce Program. And our team stretches everywhere from Houston through Europe to the majority of our team are actually based out in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So we have to cover a lot of time zones, and it's a very disparate team, literally pretty much across the world. So this is a zoomed out version of the Huddle Board that we use, and I'll just take you through it to give you an idea of some of the things we use it for and how it works for us. So at this sort of zoomed out level, it looks pretty complicated. It looks pretty messy. But in essence, it's really quite simple. You've effectively got 4 key areas. You've got top left, the leadership team themselves. Below that, you've got the team and the people section. Top right, you've got run and maintain, sort of business as usual team operations. And then sort of bottom right, you've got more the sort of projects and improvements piece. Okay. So if we just zip into each one of those areas in turn, you can see the sort of things that are in there. So we have twice a week, we have an hour-long kickoff. Sorry, an hour-long sort of huddle session, which is long for a huddle, but we need that time to get through everything that we need to get through. So we always kick it off with a sort of personal check-in, the leadership team ourselves. How are we feeling? And again, with these, you can just move these stickies around and place them to reflect how you're feeling on a particular day. And clearly, if somebody's sort of way down here, for instance, we can pick up on that and make sure they're okay and see if there's anything we can do to help them. I tend to be on the low energy side of things because I'm usually doing these huddle meetings at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning for me, while Kuala Lumpur are sort of at sort of mid-afternoon their time. So that's just a nice little way of getting into that sort of how are you feeling, how's everybody, how productive is anybody feeling at any given time? Just a good way of bringing that to the surface. Clearly keeping on top of things like absences, holidays, anything like that. We have our standard agenda that we follow, and using the sort of countdown clock that's available in Mural. We have timing set so that we see the timing counting down, and we know whereabouts in the agenda we should be by any given point in time. We follow the same agenda every day in order. So we start off with the leadership team check-in, then we go and talk about the sort of team and the people side of things. So if there's anything particularly happening within the team, then it's good to know about it. And we always do it in a sort of forward-looking sense. So it's this week, next week, and the week after. So for us, within our team, for instance, one of the big things coming up in the next couple of weeks is everybody in Southeast Asia will disappear off on Ramadan. And that has quite a big impact on when we are able to hold meetings, and particularly if they're longer meetings that span sort of meal times and so on. Very multicultural team we have, and we need to be very aware of that sort of thing. So interesting time of year within the sort of Christian countries. We've got Easter this weekend, and then we've got Ramadan coming up, and then Eid and so on. So just simply being on top of things like that is actually quite important. We've then got a little piece we use for sort of activities that cross the whole team. So things like getting everybody's development plans updated, that needs to be done by a certain date. So we use this sort of little slider technique to visualize where each team is. And again, it gives us the ability to then zone in on if there's a particular team that's lagging behind, and there's only a few days to go and they're still only at sort of 10% done, then we can offer help and see how we can chase that up. Again, with a view to looking ahead, what's coming, we have a sort of general profile of the traffic coming in and out of this team throughout the year, so that we know by this time next month, when this moves across to there, we know that we're heading into a particularly busy period. This is all to do with contractors, and contractors tend to be on sort of 6-month or 12-month contracts. So you get a big peak at the beginning, end of the year, sort of Christmas time, and then you get a sort of secondary peak halfway through the year when you get lots of sort of contract extensions coming up. So we just use that as a sort of fairly rudimentary idea to give a sense of what can people expect over the next few weeks, what's coming at us. For the operational side of the team, the sort of business as usual operations, we just simply have sort of what are the lowlights, what are the highlights, and then sort of emerging issues. So for the emerging issues, we try to log those in terms of what they are, what seems to be causing them, what the immediate countermeasure to those things are. And then as we move across, we've got owners and when it's due by and so on, so that we can follow up. Again, always trying to be forward-looking, always trying to be action-oriented, to make sure that we've got our view going forward, rather than looking in the rearview mirror, which a lot of the time people seem to end up trying to do. Just to bolster this with a little bit more data, we have links through to our actual dashboards, which are run in Power BI. So at any point in time, we can zoom in on those and see some really quite sort of granular detail. To be honest, we don't really use those very much, because everything else, the other things on the Huddle Board here tend to sort of do that work for us. Very rarely do we need to get into that level of detail. Last but not least, we have the sort of projects area, where we have key initiatives. There's a much bigger project piece, which we'll look at in a second. But the sort of top 6 most high priority key strategic projects are also represented on here. And again, just fairly sort of simple visual management techniques. Is everything on track? Is it green? Is it red? Does it need attention? It becomes very obvious where things need attention or not, just by sort of moving the pin to represent where it is. We can then talk to the exceptions, not waste time necessarily talking too much about things that are on track and just going ahead. And again, the same type of idea. If something does need attention, if something isn't going particularly well, or is a bit off track, what do we think is causing that? What immediate countermeasures have we got to sort of unblock whatever's blocking it? Who's going to do it and by when? So that gives a sense of the overall status of the projects. But then we also have this little bit at the end, which is what's your next milestone? So again, with the emphasis on being forward-looking, what's coming next? So, whatever the next milestone, it doesn't really matter what that next milestone is, but to make sure that next milestone is identified, when is it due, and how confident are you about hitting it? And again, just with a view to talking to the exceptions, if there's very obviously something that we have a milestone to hit, we have the deadline, but that it needs to be hit by. But if we're actually not very confident that that's going to happen, well, firstly, why are we not very confident that it's going to happen? And secondly, what are we doing about it now, today, to try and make sure that we do hit it? So really trying to, what we found, again, sometimes this is cultural, but what we've found is that when we did project reviews in the past, people were always looking in the rearview mirror. They were always talking about, it was always an update session of what we achieved last week or what we achieved the week before. Well, it's been and gone. That's ancient history now. We need to be talking about what's coming at us, what's happening next week, the week after, what's that next thing that's coming at us, and are we going to hit that next thing on the date that we said we would? Now, we've seen quite a sort of sea change in how well our projects get delivered since we started using this about a year ago, where we used to be habitually 4 to 6 months behind on our projects. It's not perfect by any means, but we tend to be much more punctual and tend to hit much more of the deadlines than we used to using this technique. A couple of added things is there's sort of an inherent linkage between the section at the top here and the projects piece. So if we see the same operational lowlights month after month, or we see the same emerging issue over and over again and struggling to be resolved, then that flips down into this bottom section and becomes a project to actually have some proper structure put behind it and to be dealt with properly. Okay. And that that becomes your project pipeline for new ideas and new project and improvement areas. We always try to finish the huddles with just a little bit of feedback. What went well, what didn't go so well, anything new we want to try. So we've got that sort of PDCA type loop within what we do. As with everything, these things evolve over time and hopefully get better. So that's where we use it for the remote management. And then just to give you a sense of the other sort of project side of it. So where I've just showed you those 6 key strategic projects, that's then backed up by some more detail on a second mural canvas, which goes in a little bit deeper. And this is, whereas the Huddle Board that I've just showed you was for the benefit and the attention of the leadership team, what I'm showing you now is very much run by the actual project managers themselves. So whoever's leading each individual project will keep this up to date and let this help them sort of guide them through managing their own project. So you've got many of the same things. You've got what's your next deliverable, what's the one after that, how confident are you of hitting it? If not, why not? And strangely, what we found quite interesting is where people actually mark themselves as being 100% confident, actually get them to answer that question, why? So if you are 100% confident about hitting your deadline, where's that confidence coming from? Yeah, is it just blind faith, or have you actually got some evidence to back up that you're going to hit it? This proves very useful from, again, keeping the project managers forward-looking, making sure that they're constantly looking forward at what the next thing is, making sure that there's always some kind of response plan or action plan if something does need attention. And then as more of a sort of project structure and discipline piece across the top here, we've got almost like a roadmap. And then if you zoom in on here, it sort of says, it sort of stipulates what is expected as you move from sort of step to step in terms of the project's overall roadmap, through from framing it through to completing it. So this pulls together a lot of information in what is essentially just a very straightforward visual. You've got effectively the charter down the left-hand side. You've got the status down the middle. You've got the forward-looking piece in terms of the next steps. And you've got some kind of response plan at the bottom in terms of if something's blocking it, and the overall status and sort of position or maturity of it going across the top. Interestingly, if you want to look at one that's green, for instance, and on track, this is another one that we've got where we're putting a bit of robotic process automation in place. So this one's entirely on track. It's all in good shape. Everything's happening as it should. So you'll notice that there's no blockers in the bottom section, but we still always have what's that next step and the one after that. So we always maintain that sort of forward-looking emphasis. So that's almost, we're trying to instill that almost sort of Toyota Carter type thinking. What's your first next step? What's the one after that? And so on. Don't necessarily get tied up on the end goal. What's that next thing you want to deliver? So that's what each individual project has. If I zoom out of this, you'll see what an absolutely monumental thing it is. So wow. That's the overall canvas. So we have space for 40 projects. We typically have between 25 and 35 running at once. If we've got any more than that, then we've probably got bigger things to worry about if we've got that many improvements happening at the same time. But one of the great things about this is even from this very sort of zoomed out view, we've done the visuals in such a way that you can see, you have to sort of zone in on it a bit, but you can see where the ones are in green and you can see where the ones are in red, and you can zoom in on them and pick up where the exceptions are. Just for sort of completeness, there's a sort of Gantt chart thing that goes along with this that we run in Excel. So if I just click on this link at the top here to give you a sense of what also lies behind this. So we just have an Excel version of the same, just plotted against a Gantt chart, so you can see where the sort of the clashes and the hot spots are in terms of too many things happening at once. That's just a little enhancement. So there you go.
That's great, Peter.
So that's what we use it for. Between the simulations and the training and the huddle boards and the sort of project tracking and management. I just wanted to give you that as a bit of a, hopefully to sort of give you an idea of the myriad of different things you can use Mural for. It's an absolutely fantastically versatile tool.
Yeah. You're getting some accolades. Great. Thank you for sharing your board and your insights, Peter. Impressed, very impressive. And I've never seen a dashboard like this. Wow, this is impressive. We've had Mural for a while, but haven't done anything this comprehensive yet. Great work. Super awesome. That's a nice one.
Super awesome. Yeah.
Super awesome. These are great. Excellent presentation. Amazing dashboard. Thank you, William.
I have a question, Peter.
Sure.
How many iterations do you think you went through before you obviously there's probably a lot of iteration at the beginning and then it kind of slows down and then maybe a few more. I don't know. I'm just assuming. Tell us just a little bit about how that went and when you finally kind of landed on this.
Well, what I'll do is I'll actually zoom in on this piece here because I've been actually tracking some of this stuff. Just something I get asked a lot. We have a big sort of push towards visual management within Shell and across Shell. And we constantly get asked for, an example of goodness, show me one that's excellent. And it's always quite difficult to do that because clearly what works for one team isn't going to make any sense at all to somebody else. So being able to just give somebody a fully finished article and say, that's an example of something that's great, doesn't really work. So to that end, when we first set this up, we deliberately started recording our own sort of iterations and improvements that we made along. So for instance, on the 1st of December, these boxes here that are in the sort of blue with the red lines around them, again, we wanted something, the number of actions that we had were sort of getting lost in the noise, and we wanted something to really sort of bring those out and make those very prominent. So we added the sort of dark blue boxes with the red around. And then when you put the yellow Post-it notes on top of that, it really quite visually stands out. It's like, right, I know that a blue box with a red outline is an action, and bang, there's an action waiting for me. So something like that was just just a little improvement that we put in place. Somebody noticed, for instance, this is I love this one. Somebody noticed that when we first set it up with the standard agenda, we had the time counting up. So we do the first 10 minutes on this, and we do the next 10 minutes on this, and the next 10 minutes on this. But then somebody pointed out, well, hang on, the clock is counting down. So you, as the facilitator, you were constantly having to sort of like do a little bit of mental arithmetic. Well, if that's 50 minutes, right, I've got 10 minutes left. So actually, if you then zoom over to this, you'll notice that the time counts down. So now the clock and the agenda match. So it's just silly little things like that.
That's great.
can really make it, can just make it so much easier. And that's
wonderful. Wonderful.
So yeah, we've probably not been through that many complete redesigns. We're probably on version 3, I would think, of the overall board. But the little iterations and the little improvements within it are almost, every couple of weeks.
I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions, but we've only got 2 minutes left, so we're going to have to wrap it up. So Elizabeth, do you want to take over the reins? And I don't know where the
actually Peter still has the
sorry. Do I need to give you hosting?
No, you're good. Peter, just bring us back to the final slides. And Peter's game to hang out and answer questions, but I want to be mindful of the time frame for folks, the 1 hour time frame. So we'll just give you a quick overview of what's to come. Tracy, do you want to describe the upcoming webinar happening?
Sure.
In a couple of weeks.
So this is happening in a couple of weeks with Carlos Cruz, how the shingle model can revolutionize your culture. And he is the CEO of the Guiding Principles. He's going to walk you through the power of the shingle model and how the framework helps teach us about relationships between culture, systems, and principles, which are essential for the results-driven organization. If you're failing to see a substantial transformation or your systems are failing to reinforce operational efficiency, you should come to this webinar.
Thanks, Tracy. And the next one is about our podcast. Episode 65 is out. This one includes our interview with Jeffrey Liker. He likes to be called Jeff. He wrote the seminal book, The Toyota Way. He updated it recently. And this interview talks about how he incorporated Toyota Kata. That's what Peter was referencing as an influence on some of what they did in this visual board. But he is just a fascinating guy. It's a great interview. Podcasts are all on the Just in Time Cafe under podcast. So JITCAFE.com, jitcafe.com. And then just look for webinars, look for podcasts. And I think, is that all we had on those 2 slides, or what do we have for the next one?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Oh, how to reach us. If you're on this webinar, you're automatically going to get updates of what we've got coming out to you. And that is all for us. So I want to say goodbye to folks that have to leave, but I also want to welcome people to stay if they have questions for Peter. But thank you guys. You've been a wonderful audience, a wonderful group of participants. You were very game, and that is lovely. Any questions for Peter? I don't want to cut off anybody who had a question.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing so much. That piece where you had the 40 projects, and each project leader updates his project, right? And we count that people are skilled enough not to mess anybody else's project, or is there some protection in Mural, or we just take it easy, otherwise we'll repair it.
Yes. To be honest, we've not come across any protection to stop people randomly sabotaging other people's projects. It's
not thinking about mistakes, you know.
Yes,
yeah.
no. It's done very much on a trust basis. The lady who's sort of our program manager is sort of in amongst all of that stuff every day. So if anything gets moved or put out of place, then she tends to notice anyway. But what we try to do very deliberately is we try to pitch that. We call it the war room or the campaign room. And we try to pitch it very much as, look, this is not a reporting tool. This is not a way of bringing your senior leaders up to date or anything. This is for your benefit. This is to keep you on track, and to help you think about what's coming next and where you are and what the issues are and so on. Now it's taken a bit of, it's fair enough to say it's taken a bit of time to get there in terms of swapping that mindset. But we, after 6 months or so, we seem to be over the worst of that. And people are in there using it as a sort of active way of managing their projects rather than just sort of like I say, in a sort of rear view mirror reporting function. So when it's in their own interests to keep it up to date and accurate, they tend to sort of take it a bit seriously. Yeah.
And it's mostly for you as coaches to interact with them, or is it also for their managers to look at it? Or who gets to peek into that sort of inner gut?
Well, yeah, anybody who's got the link can go and have a look. And we do encourage people to go in there and have a look at anything that they happen to be interested in or curious about. Again, with a caveat, please don't move anything. Yeah.
And did someone, thank you, Sabine. Nice to see you. Esther, did you have a question?
Yes, quick question. So were there any challenges to make people on board with the systems? Like, this is a kind of new system. It's not everyone kind of wanting to use the system. How is there any challenge? Was there any challenge? Were there any challenges, and how you deal with that?
No, I think my experience of introducing people to Mural is it's so user friendly and it's so intuitive that after sort of 5 minutes they're entirely comfortable with it. And are sticking up Post-it notes and things all over the place. So in terms of actually using the system from that point of view, I've not had any problems at all. The challenges, I suppose, have been the same challenges as you would have doing this in any format. So when we first introduced the concept of a huddle board and twice weekly meetings, and being sort of very structured and all this sort of thing, people pushed back against that. It's like, well, why can't we just have our normal departmental meeting and so on? But quite honestly, when we were in the sort of physical office environment, you had exactly the same resistances, even if you were sort of, stood next to a group of people facing a wall. That side of it is no different just because it happens to be electronic. So I think the resistances and the challenges that you have are just the ones that you naturally have around. There's always a bit of a reticence amongst some people to making things visible, because it's like hanging your own dirty laundry out and things like that. So finding a way past that and really just having the perseverance to the point where people can see that it's adding value and see that it's making their lives easier, and seeing that we're actually on top of things far more than we used to be. Those are really the only challenges. And I say you'd have those challenges anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for that question, Esther. That's great. Any others? Got a few folks here.
Well, quickly, we can, we have seen at least, in training, for instance, that, virtual is not that bad. Sometimes, for some purposes it's better. And sometimes, for focusing attention, for divergent things it's a little bit difficult, but for focusing, I think it's very good. So now that you're managing more things, virtually with these tools, how does that compare with your prior experience, with more face-to-face on it? What are your thoughts about that?
I think where you're managing lots of, where you're doing that sort of program management piece where you're spinning lots of plates in the air at once, I would be tempted to say that this actually is better than trying to do it in real life, or in the physical world. I think where the physical world still has an edge is where you're doing that sort of typical Kaizen type work where you've got a very specific problem and you bring a team together of people, you lock yourself in a room, and suddenly 3 days later it's solved. That sort of just very organic creativity, energy, that sort of thing. I still haven't found a way of recreating that online. You can do the brainstorming, you can do the collaboration, you can do the mapping and all that sort of thing. It's all possible, but it's still not quite the same. It's still not quite got the same sort of energy and enjoyment behind it, even if the end result is probably not far off as good. It's just not as fun.
We're missing all the side conversations, and the conversation.
Yeah, and that's one thing we have noticed with the training actually, is because we're training in the way we do the training is we do sort of a 2.5 hour block, then have a couple of hours break, and then do another 2.5 hour block in the afternoon just to sort of break it up, and you deliver the piece that you're delivering. And then you take 10 minutes and then you come back and you deliver the next piece. And what you don't get in that environment, what you don't get is those conversations while you're having your cup of coffee, or those conversations while you're having your lunch. And I have to say, I really miss that, because there was always a lot of very interesting questions and good storytelling and so on came out of those type of interactions. And that very sort of informal side of the training is something that you just don't get when you're doing it in the sort of virtual world.
Yep. The virtual world. If that's unless, I know we still have Kelly and we have Lynn. Lynn made a comment. We're doing the same thing, 2.5 hours, then a long break, and then 2.5 hours in the afternoon.
Yep.
Esther gave us a sign off. Any last questions? Peter's been incredibly generous with us. Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well,
you're very welcome. It's been fun.
Peter, if you want to make me the host, I can take us home.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you all of
you. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for sharing everything.
Bye,
that was awesome.
Leave you to it. Take care.